Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, let's not bury the lead. You delivered some big news last week. How have things been since then?
Things have been kicking along. Yes, we had a run on balances when the news came out. A lot of people anteed up again the following day and a few days later. Looking at the numbers, everything was normal and even maybe up on the weekend volume-wise. But that's expected. If I wasn't an insider that could see what was happening, I'd be pulling my money and making sure I got paid quickly and then back in the door, whatnot. So all the feedback's been, fairly strong and fairly supporting. You get your occasional nuffs that sort of chime in with different things, but everything's been pushing forward as needed be. Behind the scenes conversations are kicking on. Whatever this process is, I'm learning at Bankruptcy 101 University that I'm currently in. And again, it's just pushing forward, still taking bets. Weekend and week was decent. So maybe we'll turn this thing around and pull it out of bankruptcy before you know it.
All right, and we'll get into the latest results from the football weekend that was in a moment. But Joe, want to bring you into the fold here as well, because while you haven't been involved with Prime Sports in any official capacity for some time, you are still a co-founder. So what does all this mean for you, and what's your message to everyone?
Well, when I left, it's not like I left my heart on the desk and took the checkbook with me, right? I still talk about Prime in terms of we. I haven't taught myself to any level of separation because we started that and I have high aspirations for it. And I still do. I got to tell you, I'm probably like a lot of people who I hear the word bankruptcy and I'm just kind of like, ugh, God, this got to be the worst. But, the most important thing is obviously making the players happy. And I do appreciate the ones that, did the run on the bank and then came back like a day or two later or whatever it may be. And I said to one of them, yeah, look, it's up to us to be able to show you guys that things are unchanged. And if it's going to take a little while for some of the other people to convince them, come back, and for new people to place bets there, then you know what? It's on Prime to do that. It's Prime's responsibility. Beyond that, I had one person say oh, you guys are taking the easy way out declaring bankruptcy. That's bullshit. This is the hard way. The easy way would have just been to shut things down and run away. How many different brands did. Betway, Betfred, people like that. Guys who had hundreds of millions of dollars and seemed to be on every end board, every outfield wall and everything like that. And they couldn't make it go. And we're hanging tough. And the other thing is I was thinking about it actually earlier today. For early stage in the U.S. regulated sports betting world, this is kind of, in a way, the norm, which is spend a lot of money before you're going to get the profitability. FanDuel and DraftKings spend a lot of other people's money to do that. They were lucky in that they got to go to the public markets and they had people give them billions of dollars of their money in order to make this happen. And those guys only started going, cash flow break even, I think it was last year. So the fact that we are where we are, Prime is where it is, it's kind of par for the course. We just don't have the benefit that Jason Robbins and Amy Howe does of every time they need a couple of bucks, they can go screaming to Wall Street, whereas, Prime has to come up with it itself. So it is going to be a kind of a tough process. I don't know what's going to happen. For certain right now, I'm very interested, especially on the behalf of the Sport AD investors who I'm a part, who came into the company to find out where things are going. But beyond having a couple of uncomfortable conversations about this, things seem to be clicking along as they were.
And with that, we will make a hard pivot back to business as usual. Adam, how were results across Week 12 in college football and Week 11 in the NFL for Prime Sports and BetCris? And how'd your two remaining Circa Survivor entries fare this past weekend?
So overall for a full week, it was a good week. I think all states were generally green. Ohio had our typical player took down a ton of money, but we actually take him out of it, had a good weekend. Saturday was good. Georgia was great game. Sunday took some bad games that flipped. Example, Buffalo, Tampa Bay was probably the biggest game of the day. Looked safe and solid the whole way through. And not only did they get in front Buffalo, but then they tagged on another touchdown at the end just to cover and blow that out. Packers and Ravens games both landed on the number. so they're generally not good. Jaguars, 49ers, no good. But Dolphins, Bears, and were both very good, and Broncos were great. So all in all, we chalk this up as a good week, considering the news we broke and everything that's going on right now. As for the Survivor, I still have two. I did play the Thursday night game, so I was comfortably sitting there Sunday and didn't sweat too much with my Pittsburgh Steelers finally going with that one. And thankfully, just to feel like I am still walking through raindrops, Atlanta got beat, which was the original one that I was looking at Wednesday, Thursday. So still got two, still chipping away. I don't know how many got knocked out. I don't think it was that many because, again, Ravens come back and won, Packers come back and won, Buffalo as well. So I was hoping for a bit more carnage, getting two through, but so be it, and on to next week.
Yeah, Atlanta did knock out the most entries, and that was 43. So much smoother sailing for most of the competition this week relative to last. But we are now under 1,000 entries, so we'll see what the future holds for those two that you're still holding on to, Adam. But moving right along with this show, and speaking of business as usual, prediction markets continue to dominate the sports betting news cycle. Just 1 week after DraftKings announced it'll launch a prediction market with sports event contracts, FanDuel has followed suit. Adam, Peter Jackson, the CEO of FanDuel parent company Flutter, suggested they might act as a market maker with sports events contracts, saying the strength of our world-class pricing and risk management capabilities present potential market-making opportunities. With that, what's your point of view on prediction market platforms trading against their own consumers? And if FanDuel does this, how do you think they'd fare in an open market competing against other professional traders?
So, I mean, that's potentially a way they can go. Again, getting your markets into the Robinhoods and the Kelshys and the Polymarket. Like all those places as a market maker is one way to do it. Building out their own vertical and branding it is another way to do it. Obviously, there's, I believe, 5 states that have said they're not going to be up for that. However, I've also heard that both DraftKings and FanDuel have potentially said, great, here's your license back. So it'll be really interesting. And 2 of those states we're actually in. So if DraftKings and FanDuel want to hand back those licenses, go right ahead, because then it means there's a pool of players looking for a home, and they are sports betting only states, so they're not sticking around for the casino. But generally, I see them going forward with this, whether it's a market maker quietly behind the scenes, whether it's their own branded prediction market. They're ultimately looking at the states where there's not license, the Texas, the Californias, where they can build those databases like they've been doing with the fantasy sports. How will they do overall? Again, they're big brands. They're going to get eyeballs on it. And especially if they do certain partnerships and get certain liquidity through different channels. On the flip side, they're also potentially going to get other market makers that they may ingest, which then does sharpen their numbers on their sports book as well. So there's many ways this can go. I presume that they will just keep kicking forward, not too concerned about the states kicking up a stink. I've always said, I don't believe the exchange, the prediction market, all those kind of things are going to overrule what the sports book and iCasino, iGaming kind of world is. It's just another piece of it. And I think it's ultimately a very small piece, but there is things that you can't do in the States and the sports catalog that you can do in the prediction market. So it does open up more liquidity on random things like what's the highest temperature going to be for the day, and some of these political events and things like that. So there has to be a point in time, an inflection point where all the states and everything comes together and they just work this out. But there's a lot of stubborn and pig-headed people in this space. So I don't know when that'll be.
Well, Joe, building on what Adam alluded to, the FanDuel news came with the surrendering of its Nevada license, which was more symbolic than material to its business. But there are still 5 other states whose regulators have warned of prediction market involvement. So if you're in the shoes of Jackson, FanDuel CEO Amy Howe, or DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins, what's your game theory here? And what's the likelihood they actually surrender other licenses if push comes to shove?
Well, they're certainly, willing to shoot a hostage, so to speak, but it was a decidedly easy hostage to shoot. Nobody's that interested in Nevada. I mean, God knows I love Nevada. I love sports betting in Vegas, but it's pretty, I would say, provincial out there in Nevada. They still talk about Nevada as the gold standard of gaming, and Nevada is so far behind the digital gaming world right now. I just wonder, when are they going to wake up? But also Nevada is kind of I would say, an extreme illustration of the way people are perceiving the brick and mortar gaming world regulating in the digital world. Nevada makes it incredibly expensive to even apply for a license, several $1,000,000 just to apply for a license. It takes forever to get it. They are more than happy to run up your tab because you pay for it when they're doing the investigation. And in the end, the opportunity really isn't that great, so at least not for a FanDuel or a DraftKings. So while it might seem to some, the inexperience, which seems to be about 99.9% of the people who make comments about this stuff or follow it through Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, or the Financial Times, looking at Nevada, cashiering Nevada is no big deal. They do it to New Jersey, that'd be a different thing altogether, okay? New Jersey's the leader in the digital world, at least in the United States. And there's more than just the business there. There is all the operations, all the investments that they've made in that state. So if they were to step out of New Jersey, that it's more than just the business that they're giving up. It's a big move. So, but at least for the time being, Jason and Amy can, say like, we're willing to do this. I do think it's a little premature, especially when you see, that things have not necessarily been going swimmingly in the courts for them, this is probably a 3-year ride to eventually wind up in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, maybe faster. But I don't know that they would want to go and knock out one of the legs of their stool and go all in on something like prediction markets and then get to the Supreme Court and find out now we have no legs on our stool. It might be great for Prime if they did that. It'd be great for a lot of people if they did that, but I don't imagine that they will.
All right, well, continuing with another recurring theme on this show in recent weeks, the NFL has sent a memo to team officials saying that in light of recent gambling scandals and other sports, the league has worked with lawmakers, regulators, and sports betting partners in recent weeks to limit and, where possible, prohibit prop bets in the NFL. Adam, other than the sports books that have business relationships with the league complying out of necessity, what do you expect in terms of U.S. sports books voluntarily taking props off the menu?
Well, it's even wider than that, Matt, because ultimately, if you're using live betting, you're using NFL data, even if that comes through BetGenius within their contracts are going to have these things that you can't offer. It already exists. BetCris in Latin America, with the deal that they have with international NFL, I don't think they've renewed it, but they had it some years ago. You couldn't do a lot of these props that they're now listing. It was in the contract. It was in the thing where anything that a referee could do or have involvement, you couldn't offer bets on. Even things, there's some states that don't offer the first draft pick because a lot of these things are predetermined. The first play of a game has probably been decided on Thursday night on walkthroughs and stuff like that. So there's a lot of these things that make sense. And as to who follows, again, it's broader than those that are just tied to NFL teams or NFL stadiums. If you're wanting that data, it's generally going to come through BetGenius, which have, NFL's an owner of BetGenius, and there's going to be things within the contract there. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't think it hurts. I think there's some of these things that you just don't need to offer. Will you be able to still get some of these things at unregulated books? Sure, 100%. Because, that's where they're going to use it as their edge to offer product that the regulated books can't. That's kind of the game of it. Does that mean that you can get it down on predictions and you can't get it on your sports book? Maybe, because they just seem to be offering things that others can't use and we're really just portraying offshore sports books kind of thing as well. So it's a lot of noise about nothing. I think the NFL, the NBA are all starting to get in a bit of a panic. What they're not realizing is this is all good stuff. This is good that we've found these things. This is good that players are becoming aware of it, because once we go through the baseball players and everyone else and they end up getting X amount of fines or X amount of time in jail or whatever these end up being, players are going to realize this. And these are players that are earning multitudes, millions of dollars annually, and they're going to go mess that up for a couple of $100,000 bets. And we're not even talking $100,000 bets. We're talking $1,000, $2,000 bets. So I think this is just part of the process. America's catching up to the rest of the world that have been through this already, and it'll just iron out and clean it up and we'll end up where we are. But overall, I don't think we lose anything by not offering these things.
And Joe, how serious do you think the NFL is about banning props in terms of putting meaningful resources into actually affecting change at a regulatory level versus this memo and related posturing projecting optics and managing a narrative?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is posturing. Yeah, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, all their commissioners, once PASPA was overturned, they're all out in front telling everybody, oh, you're going to be able to bet on every play and every shot. And, they loved it because they're like, oh, wow, this is going to increase fan engagement, which is going to increase the value of their broadcast rights and other things. So these guys, they can't act as if they weren't part and parcel of this. They're an organic part of the growth of prop wagering the same way we are. And also the public. The public really wants this after being groomed as fantasy sports bettors for the better part of 3 decades. And this is just the way Americans think about sports. It's just not interesting to bet only on the outcome of the game or on the total of the game. But after being kind of hot under the collar when I first saw it, and then seeing when you drill down into the memo, like what was going to be prohibited, it's kind of garbage. All right. The only one that I thought was interesting is like, you can't bet on a play that it will only be decided by one person. And, if you cite an example of a kicker. Well, I think if you watch any football game, you see just how many people are involved in any kind of kicking. You just have to look at Alabama's kicker from this past weekend and how he responded when he missed a kick to jump all over the long snapper on national TV about that. So he clearly thought the guy had a role. It's not a skills contest. They don't just have a kicker lining up by himself to see if he splits the uprights. There's 22 people on the field. So there's no, for the most part, there's really no instance of that in football where it comes down to one person. The rest of it was kind of like, okay, you can't bet on officiating. We know how precious the NFL is about their officiating. And I say that now, being an Eagles fan, and I guess we've taken over the Chiefs mantle as the team most favored by officiating. So I guess it's good that that's happening. In the end, they're just going to make sure that the narrative is that they're going to be tough on this, and that they want to make sure that we're offering only product that is good and pure and healthy for sports consumers, when really what this comes down to is it's their employees who are cheating. And so they should worry about their employees and what they're doing rather than the bet categories that the sports books are offering. And if I seem like maximalist on this, it's because I don't think the leagues or the NCAA should be dabbling in our kitchen when it comes to what bet types. We run these bet types through the regulators. We don't just hang this shit. We don't just get a notion one day like, hey, Adam, why don't we put up a posting about what color jockstrap, Mike Tyson's going to wear for his interview at the end of the next fight or something like that. We have to run this stuff through our state regulators. That's the part of the process that the public doesn't see, and that amazingly, that the leagues are ignoring here right now. So this has been vetted. They've been on board with it. So they're just trying to right now make sure that they're on the right side of the public narrative to, they're, as I love it, protect the shield. Even though shields are used to protect people, you don't protect shields. Anyway.
All right. With that, Adam, as a USC grad headed to Eugene this weekend, I'm not sure I want to ask our final weekly question based on early money I've seen come in on Oregon. But what noteworthy action are you seeing since posting openers across Week 13 in college football and Week 12 in the NFL?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I did have a look at that one, and the money is flowing against your team there. It was really the only one that was getting any kind of volume on the college. On the NFL, though, it was very surprising how many games have actually gotten decent volume. Bills -3.5 was some pro money coming early. Chicago, Pittsburgh getting great two-way action at the 3. Ravens, Jets getting great two-way at the -14, +14.5. Pat, Cincinnati is extraordinary volume for a Monday at the -6.5, 7, +7, +7.5. Seahawks getting a lot of big teaser money. Jags getting money at the -2.5 from a rec guy. Big master money coming on the Colts at the +4 and +3.5. 90% overall of the money is on the Colts as well. And then the interesting one was even Monday night, San Francisco, Carolina, 80% of the money on San Fran, 80% of the pro money was already on Carolina, and that was big volume as well. So, yeah, when I've looked at the charts the last few weeks, it's sort of struggled to find the volume and see where it's at and sort of bringing up narratives, but it was easy today. Just looked at those charts and the monies were already full. And yeah, it's great signs again, considering what we went through last week. And a bulk of this money is in those 3 states where Prime sits. So yeah, it was really good to see the numbers this morning.
And a quick follow-up to your point about the Seahawks getting a lot of early teaser money. When you see a team getting hit hard on teasers early in a week, what's your philosophy when it comes to teaser protection, as many will call it, just trying to aggressively move the point spread to a less key number to de-incentivize teaser action, versus bigger picture, considering adjusting teaser pricing, as a lot of books have done when we looked at the teaser landscape heading into this NFL season?
Yeah, I don't think you can price teasers any shorter than they are. It's hard to play a teaser these days with the price you've got to pay at a lot of these books. But I've noticed it more and more the last few weeks, in particular last weekend with the Packers and Giants. When I was looking at the game, I was thinking how significant and how much volume was actually on the Packers. And then when I dug into it a little bit more, 80% of it was teaser money. But that had sort of taken the number from, I think it was 6.5 to 7 at the time, which ultimately ended 7.5. Are we moving off that teaser money? Not necessarily, because again, you're leaving yourself open for the 6.5 point, spread kind of thing. But yeah, it's, as I'm seeing this early money on some of these big favorites, as I dive into it, 85-90% of the money is actually teasers, not straight bets, which then sort of, when you're looking at those things, and I'm looking at the recreational players one side and the masters on the other, there's some sort of false narratives there. So I've had to sort of start digging in a little bit deeper on those bigger favorites just to see, well, no, it's not the recreational players laying 7.5. They're actually buying down and getting the 1.5 and finding a friend for it in the teaser world.
And when we're looking at a team like Seattle this week, I'm seeing them, as a double-digit favorite. That doesn't fit the model for the classic Wong teaser model of crossing through 3 and 7 on a 6-point teaser. So at certain times, if you're getting flooded with action, but it doesn't seem to be as advantageous as some more, tried and true approaches, if you will, are you more inclined to just let that money flow in without really adjusting at all?
And yeah, in that situation, because when I looked at it, they were really just bringing it down to 7. So it's not even like they were bringing it to 6.5. They were just bringing it down and having it sitting on 7. So there's a lot of these spots. And a lot of this is recreational early money doing these teasers. So these aren't, guys that we really have our eyes on, that always playing across certain numbers and things like that. This is pure rec money that we're seeing on this. And as you said, it doesn't really follow the pattern, but there's people out there thinking, well, I can take 13 down to 7. Seems like a steal. Let's fly with that. And then you got to find the friend of it. And usually it's the friend that causes the problems when building these teasers as well.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and note that not all Wong teasers are winners and not all non-Wong teasers are losers. So I don't want to be too militant on that. But Adam, I appreciate you humoring me with a mini version of teaser talk to wrap up this week's episode. As we tie a bow around it, much to Joe's delight, we'll call out to the audience that whatever the future holds for NFL prop betting, prediction markets, and state licenses, we'd like to thank you as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at @PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.